Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to Vlog 40, Sharing Success. And wow, have we got a success story to talk about. It's my pleasure to introduce the wonderful Glory Gatwiri to our video and vlog audiences. Many of you know her already. She's been a remarkable PhD student, a credit to this university, a credit to her wonderful country, and she's currently under examination, or indeed, her thesis is. But her journey through her candidature is absolutely exemplary. And while her doctorate is currently being examined, she's already achieved a permanent, yes, tenured lectureship post at Southern Cross University. It's an amazing experience. Can I say, her mother and her wonderful sister are sitting about 5 feet over there. So they're as excited as we are, and I'm so thrilled to have her family with us today. We are so proud of her in the Office of Graduate Research, but she has a very special vantage point from which to speak. Because I'm aware so many of our students out there get depressed, I'll never get a job, what's going to happen, how is my life going to progress? And so there's something quite special and quite wonderful in learning from Glory. How are you, Glory?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I always promised you a vlog.
Yes, you did.
And your time is now. The question I wanted to start off with, if I can, Glory, is I've always wanted to ask you this actually. From your current vantage point right now, you've completed the thesis, you're in the middle of the examination. Was the PhD worth it?
Yeah, the PhD is an interesting journey for me. I think despite all the challenges and the hard work and the late nights and all the reading, it was a worthy journey to do it at the end of the day. And now that I'm in this position, looking down and looking at the journey from a place where I don't have to do that anymore, like the PhD journey is complete, I can feel like I've not only grown intellectually, but I've also grown as a person. There are so many things that I have a deeper, intimate understanding of. You know, I feel more established and more positioned. I feel like my voice has matured on so many issues. So even if it wasn't ever to get a job, just my growth, my own self-development has just been really, really incredible. So from that perspective alone, it's been really, really good. And also the other thing is that the PhD has raised my credibility. So I feel like I'm an expert in something little in this big planet of ours. So it raises my credibility. It gives me a positioning, a voice, a space in which I can speak about a few things that I'm passionate about that need to be talking about. So all those things, you know, plus the job have been really, really good for me as a PhD student.
And that's so powerful. So the employability matters, obviously employability matters, but that personal growth and that personal journey, you mostly only realise a few years later. But Glory's always had that reflexivity, and she's certainly showing it today. Next question, if I can, Glory. What do you think are the benefits or indeed the gifts that come from enrolling in a complicated program like a PhD that's emotionally so challenging? But what are the benefits, what are the gifts that it can bestow?
Okay, so personally, I would think the beauty of enrolling into a PhD is, first of all, just recognizing the beauty in research. It's all about recognizing new knowledge and also realizing there's so much that we are yet to know. That the more you do a PhD, the more you read all these books, the more you realize how little you know. And I think that has been a humbling experience in me doing this PhD. That you know, I spent so much reading, so much stuff to write the thesis. But the more I read, the more I felt, God, I barely know anything, you know, because there's so much stuff to learn. So the benefit of doing a PhD is, first of all, a humbling one in recognizing the little that we know and the journey ahead in terms of research and how much work we have to do. But also, like I said previously, just the benefits of also doing a PhD is about also self-development and self-growth and also credibility, and we need more expertise on the planet at the moment. We need intellectuals, we need scholars, you know. In a world right now where ignorance is celebrated and worn as a badge of honor, we really need more people to embrace intellectualism and to embrace knowledge and to embrace knowledge in a way that is, you know, I think that's the only way we can shape the future, you know, with integrity.
So powerful, and a lot of your wonderful colleagues have heard me use the phrase intellectual generosity a lot. And what I mean by that is, you've expressed it much better than I ever do, that it's about actually being humbled, knowing a lot, but humbled to know how much more there is to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a PhD should do that, and coming to life with excitement and motivation to learn, and humbled by the great minds that exist on the planet. That's the perfect combination. You are a star. Hard question, which might be incredibly beneficial for our current students. If you had your time over again, what would you do differently?
Really,
It's a hard question, I know.
It's a hard question because there's so many things actually I wish I had done differently.
Wow.
First of all, and I think you and I have spoken about this before, is that before embarking on a PhD, I would have done a really thorough research about the persons who were going to supervise me for my project.
Yes.
You know? So just because someone seems knowledgeable about race and about gender and about issues that you're passionate about doesn't mean that they'll end up being the perfect cut for you when you're doing your research. I think that's something I didn't quite understand. As you know, I started my PhD when I was quite young. I was barely 24. I was like, oh, this is a fantastic opportunity. And I didn't really know much about how to approach it. I'd certainly never met anybody I knew personally who had a PhD. Yeah. So I didn't have that mentorship, if you'd like to call it like that. So I sort of like jumped into the deep end and said, all right, I'll try to swim. And that was a big mistake. So before you enroll into a PhD, just make sure that you've researched about the people who are going to support you. These people can either build your career or absolutely break it, because they're your supervisors. They have the supervision looking down on you while you're trying to complete this big project. So I would do that. Make sure that I have conversations, I research, I make sure that I have the right fit for the person. And then secondly, just to recognize or even plan how tiresome, tedious, lonely a PhD can get, and plan for that. You know, you will lose friendships, sometimes even relationships, because you're working many hours. And sometimes people don't tell you that. They'll be like, oh, you'll be great, you know. And sometimes you get into the deep end, you realize, I don't go out anymore. I don't do any fun things anymore. And sometimes this can be a big trigger for things like depression and anxiety and all those things. So planning your time adequately, you know, not locking yourself into the office, you know, many hours and not going out, all those things are really important into having a balanced life while you're doing your PhD. So don't neglect your friends or your partners or, you know, the support that you're getting. Try to get more balance. And I think I didn't do that very well in the first 2.5 years of my PhD, and I struggled. But towards the end, I was able to bring it all together. Yeah,
because I mean that balance, you know, they call it work and life balance often these days, but it's finding the life that allows you to freshen up so you can come back to the thesis with energy and fabulousness. And I think you're right, by the end of your thesis, you handled that magnificently. You were coming to it fresh every day.
Yes, absolutely.
So very powerful. Tell us about your thesis and publishing.
Woo.
Now, what have you already published, and what are your plans, Mrs.?
My thesis, you know, just very passionate about it, so stop me if I go on and on about it. So my thesis is about interrogating the dynamics around African womanhood, gender, health and sexuality, but also using the case study of women with vaginal fistulas.
Yes.
And for those of us who don't know what vaginal fistulas are, they're abnormal opening between the vagina and another body part, which are mostly caused by obstructed or prolonged labor, or sometimes sexual trauma.
Yes.
And what happens is that these leave women incontinent of feces and sometimes urine. So I wanted to use the stories, or to listen to the stories of black African women with incontinent bodies, and to see how they're positioned in society, and also just to use literature, previous literature that has positioned the bodies of women as being out of control, because we have bodies that leak, mostly. And we know how that is talked about in the South, we know how that is positioned and constructed. So when you're leaking other things, and especially when you're leaking urine, how does that body move into the society? How is it presented? How is it accepted or excluded in the society? And especially when it's a black body.
Indeed.
Especially when it's a black African body. So that was my whole thesis, interrogating all those dynamics about womanhood, Africanness, gender and sexuality, and how they all contribute into providing this richness of stories of women with vaginal fistulas. Yeah, it sort of like changed along the way. This is not what I started out doing, and then along the way, as I kept reading, and also while I was looking at my data, I recognized, the data is actually telling me something different from what I started out thinking that I would do. So it's trusting the data that it will provide you with the information on where you'll go with your research.
And that's a great sign. The data should always lead the interpretation rather than the other way around. That's fantastic. Right. But you've already published, I think, 2 or 3 articles, or are we at more now? 1, 2.
I've published about 6 now.
6.
And 3 are under review.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. Now, have I been able to convince you that it's a book yet?
I'm still working on that. So when I finished the thesis, I'd already had 6 publications to go, but also I decided to write 3 more in collaboration with another academic from public health, because we'd already started that conversation earlier on. So those are under review. But I haven't started on the book, and I think the monograph, I thought I would start on the monograph when we get the changes back for the examiners, so that they can tell us what we should improve and what changes we should make, and then the final version, we will turn it into a monograph.
She's very wise, isn't she? And that we will do. The world needs to read this as a book.
Okay.
The world does need to read this as a book. And as you've rightly said, the data is so rich, so evocative, so profound, but your interpretation and analysis of it, your guts, your heart, your commitment in response to that data is just remarkable. Now, we've talked about publishing in the book. I need to now talk about the job. You've done something spectacular. You've got a lectureship, a permanent lectureship in an outstanding Australian university. So how does that feel? I'm always aware, when I was a very young person, I went off and did a job not as good as yours, can I say, but I was on my own, and you're arriving in a place you don't know anybody. So how are you managing the excitement of that, but also that sort of fear that must be a part of it as well?
I think I was just telling Mum the other day, I'm still in shock, like I'm almost in denial. Like I was like, is this really happening to me? How did this happen, really? And it's not that I think I can do it, but there's also an element of disbelief in being able to secure that position, mostly because it's such a good position, and also it's permanent. And when I've been doing my PhD, I've been hearing a lot of stories about how it's going to be terribly hard to get work, and I know that firsthand. And especially permanent work, you can get contract work, or because, as you know now, there's a lot of casualization of academia. So I was worried that was going to be my own story. So you can imagine my disbelief at the moment. But I'm also really excited because I take it as an honor to be able to be in a position where I can pass knowledge and I can mentor and teach with compassion and kindness. You know, some of the people who've, you know, have really influenced me in my academic journey have been incredibly kind and, like you like to say, intellectually generous. So that is something I want to emulate as an educator, you know, as Freya said, to teach with love and with humanity and with compassion, and to always make sure that by the time you leave your class, you leave your students with a certain level of critical consciousness to be able to challenge their own thinking about life, you know, challenge their own existence, and not just to accept it as normal, to ask questions, to challenge, you know. So that is my goal as a teacher, is to make sure that I, you know, ruffle a few feathers here and there. But I'm also a bit scared, you know, it's a new place, no friends, you know. I've spent the last 3 years in Adelaide here trying to make friends and start all over again, because I was in Melbourne before, and before that I'd come straight from Kenya. So it feels like every couple of years I'm having to move to a place where I don't know anybody. So there's that element of, am I gonna do it? And also there's the element of feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, like, oh, am I really up to this? You know, can I really do it as well as they expect me to do? And I'm working through that slowly. I'm just being very honest about, you know, the emotions around it.
Because it is frightening. It is frightening because it's new and it's innovative, and expectations will be on you. But always have a short blondine's voice in your head going, back yourself, girlfriend.
That's right.
Because you are as astounding as we all think you are.
Oh, thank you.
You are. And those students, indeed this country is incredibly lucky to have you.
Thanks.
Final question. We've got a lot of students out there, and yes, at Flinders, but actually internationally, who watch this vlog, and they're going through a troubling time. And they're getting up in the morning and they're asking themselves, why am I doing this PhD day after day? Why am I doing that? How would you speak to them? What would you say to them to help them get through that day?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, it is normal to feel like that. You know, you're just because you're struggling with those feelings doesn't mean that you're not intellectually capable to finish it. So that's one thing. I don't think I've met any PhD student who's not had those feelings of, oh my god, am I gonna do this? How am I gonna finish? You know, by the time you study such a huge project and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's like you're swimming in the dark, and those feelings are normal. And also because your PhD becomes your whole life, you know, every time you watch a television, you know, a skit or whatever, you're thinking, that could be my analysis, you know, so you never really switch off. So first of all is to make sure that, or at least what I did to help me navigate through these feelings of feeling a bit unsure, is to make sure that I was very clear on my research question. You know, the moment you're clear on that, it really helps to narrow down what you should read, how you should read it, how you should analyze it, because when you're not very clear on your research question or questions, you're going like this, you're reading anything and everything and really waste a lot of your time, and at the end of the day you're feeling, I'm not making any progress, because you're not really, you know, there's not a central point at which you can go, alright, I'm focusing on this one thing. So that helped me a lot to shift from reading everything that was revolving around black women to actually shift on black Kenyan women, not just every African woman. And then secondly, what I did was to make sure that I wrote every day. It didn't matter how bad of a day I was having, I had to write something, and it was, you know, some days it would be 200 words, and other days it would be a good day, I would have 2,000 words. It just depended on how much you've read and how much if you don't have writing block at that day. So make sure you write every day. That's how I was able to measure my progress, you know. So 250 words a day, even if you read one article or two and summarize that into 200 words, it will go somewhere at the end of the day, even if you don't know where at this point, you know, it will go somewhere at the end of your thesis, because I do believe the reason why people feel stuck is because they don't see progress. But when you're doing little things like this, you do see the progress, you do feel the progress. And also surround yourself with, people who encourage you, and people who support you and uplift you. If you're always in a negative energy space, where, nothing can be done, nothing is possible, and oh my God, I'm so, I can't do it. Sometimes you need to be able to move into a space where there's a person saying, you can do it, you really can do it. And surrounding myself with those kind of people, and I've been incredibly lucky because I've had a really good supervisor, plus also I've got a really good supportive family that helps a lot. So, and I know not everybody is as privileged as I am to have those things, but those would be my tips. And also to know that we are here. If you're struggling, just, I'm on Facebook, you're on Facebook, reach out, ask
Exactly.
questions, say, what can I do? What did you do? Like, you're not alone in these struggles. Yeah.
You are terrific. Glory, you are a credit to Flinders University. You're a credit to Australian higher education. And if anybody has any doubts about what we at Flinders can do for the planet, what research training can do for the planet, I think Glory can answer those questions. She is a stellar human being, a stellar teacher, a remarkable writer, and the future of higher education is very, very safe in her hands. I wish you love, light, and peace. Glory and T, out.
Yay! Thanks.